Welcome everyone to today's FCAN's webinar, Supporting the College Success Needs of Black Students, Findings from Florida Student Surveys. My name is Kimberly Lent. I am the Assistant Director for Research and Policy here at FCAN. If you want to tweet at me during our webinar today, I'm at KRLent, or you can contact me at the email address here afterward for any questions. So we are really excited today to have two amazing presenters with us from the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice. The first is Dr. Callie Clark. Callie is a senior research associate at the Hope Center and the author of Decoding College: Stories, Strategies, and Struggles of First-Generation College Students. Callie's research focuses on education systems and how education policies and practices produce inequalities for first-generation students, students of color, underrepresented students, and students from low-income backgrounds. Prior to joining Hope, Callie worked as a researcher at the UChicago Consortium of School Research for 7 years. In addition to her formal training in education, Callie brings a great deal of practical experience to her understanding of equity in higher education. Before entering graduate school, Callie served as the founding college counselor at the Chicago High School, predominantly serving students of color and students from low-income families. She received her doctorate in social service administration from the University of Chicago, where she was an Institute of Education Sciences pre-doctoral fellow. Also joining us from the Hope Center is Dr. Vanessa Coca. Vanessa is the Director of Research at the Hope Center. Her past work, Vanessa has collaborated on a series of research reports as a consultant for the To and Through project at the UChicago Consortium on School Research. She was previously an Institute of Education Sciences funded pre-doctoral interdisciplinary research training fellow at the Research Alliance for the New York City Schools. And there she helped develop and support the NYC Partnership for College and Career Readiness. Vanessa herself is a first-generation college student who holds a PhD in Sociology of Education from the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development at NYU. She also holds a BA and an MA in Public Policy from the University of Chicago. She brings more than a decade of research experience conducting research in research practitioner partnership settings. So we're so excited to have both Callie and Vanessa with us today, and you'll get to hear from them in a little bit. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. First, we welcome your questions. You can access the question bar on the side panel. So please keep them coming throughout the webinar because we'll have some time at the end to ask our wonderful panelists your questions. Second, we want you to engage with us on social media. So you can find us on Twitter at FL College Access, when we encourage you to use the hashtag FCAN and hashtag TalentStrongFlorida. Lastly, this webinar will be recorded and the slides will be made available after the fact. So we have a lot of new folks here with us. So I just want to spend a minute to welcome you and tell you a little bit about FCAN. So FCAN's mission is that we lead the collaborative movement to ensure that every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. And our big vision is a Florida working together where education is the pathway to economic mobility for all. And we accomplish this in three main ways. The first is with research and data. And we produce reports, infographics, all centered around creating policies that help students and help them succeed. Second, we support local college access networks, which are local regional coalitions of leaders who come together to solve regional talent issues. There are currently 17 LCANs that cover 82% of Florida's population. Lastly, we host a suite of statewide initiatives to help build college and career readiness in K-12 students. That's called College Ready Florida. And we are fully in College Ready Florida season. So if you have not signed up and registered your school, do so now. And our work is guided by our 7 conditions for success. I'm not going to read all of them to you. You can find more on our website, but today's webinar really taps into opportunity for everyone, clear information and guidance, and affordability. So now why we're all here today. Many of you may be aware that in 2019, the governor signed House Bill 7071, which codified our state's attainment goal for 60% of Florida's working age adults to have a high quality education or training experience by the year 2030. And we're making good progress. Currently, around 53% of Floridians have such a degree or credential. However, there's some pretty significant gaps, most notably with Black Floridians, who trail all other race and ethnic groups, but most notably trail their white Floridian peers by double digits. So not only is this a moral imperative that we support Black students, but it's also important given the way that Florida is changing. So by the year 2030, when our goal is set, Florida will no longer be a majority white state. We're going to see increases in both our Hispanic, Latinx communities and Black Floridians. So to kick us off, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Paul Peralt. Paul is the Senior Vice President of Community Impact and Learning for Helios Education Foundation. Dr. Peralt is charged with leading the development of the Foundation's research and evaluation agenda and in managing Helios's grants and project management. Prior to joining Helios, he was a researcher at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan, where he served as the lead investigator on Arizona's Move On When Ready evaluation and the principal investigator on UMa's Ready Now UMA evaluation. Dr. Peralt has his PhD in educational foundations and policy with a specialization in research methodology. He has 2 masters from the University of Michigan as well in education administration, another one in secondary certification. And if that was not enough, he also has a JD from the University of Detroit Mercy. So welcome, Paul. Feel free to turn your camera on.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm glad to be here with all of you today, and excited about the work that we can really bring today about supporting the college success needs of Black students and finding from our Florida student survey work. Kimberly, if you'll go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about Helios first, because not all of our participants, know Helios's background and where we start from. Helios is first and foremost committed to students. We exist to provide opportunities for individuals to succeed in post-secondary education, and we work collaboratively to create those opportunities in both Arizona and Florida. Our commitment to students and the transformational power of education is based on 4 fundamental beliefs in community, equity, investment, and partnership. We believe that education changes lives and strengthens communities. We believe education is an investment, not an expense. We believe every student, regardless of zip code, deserves a high quality education, really focusing on our equity areas. And finally, we believe we will achieve our mission through partnership and collaboration. That really leads us to why we did this research today. And we did this research and partnered with the HOPE and FCAN to really understand what was happening in Florida around college enrollment for Black or African American students. And we did this by looking at data before we even entered this work. So we looked at the college enrollments across the universities. We looked at college enrollments at the 2-year colleges. We were observed and identified trends with the National Student Clearinghouse around what was happening with enrollments and where we were seeing enrollment shifts. One of the things we really saw from the beginning is, really, especially at the 2-year level, a decrease in Black students going to college, and even more importantly, Black males when we started looking at that. And taking that as a whole, when we're trying to solve these equity issues and trying to provide more opportunities through education, we really wanted to understand, well, can we learn why we're seeing these dips, not just in the pandemic for all students, but can we start targeting in and understanding why certain populations might be making these decisions? That way we can actually focus in on different intervention and supports to ultimately improve college going for all students in the state of Florida and Arizona. So with that, this is why we're doing the research. We really want to make sure that we have an opportunity to share these results and have follow-ups after this, and provide everyone with what we're learning around factors that are influencing Black college going. So thank you, Kimberly. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Paul. And now I am so excited to welcome our presenters, Callie and Vanessa from the Hope Center, as I pull up their fabulous presentation. Welcome, Callie and Vanessa.
Good afternoon. We're very excited to be here and share some of the work from our Florida survey, as Paul mentioned. We had a fabulous opportunity to conduct this study. And we're extremely excited about hearing your thoughts, from people who are working with students about some of these results as well. As you can see, this study is about barriers to college enrollment, and particularly among Black students in Florida attending two-year colleges, specifically applicants to those two-year colleges. And this work is led by Callie Clark, my colleague, who will be sharing the results. Also co-authored by me, as well as Sarah Goldrick-Rabb, the founder of the Hope Center. And it has been, we're very grateful for funding from the Helios Education Foundation for this work. Next slide, please. Before we get into results, just a little bit about the Hope Center. Some of you may be unfamiliar with our work. We have yet to do a lot of work with those in the K-12 systems, but we are on the verge of doing more of that here. So if you don't know about us, we are experts in issues of basic needs among college students. And we do a lot of work around understanding college affordability among college students today. And we have been doing this work for a while now. While the Hope Center just celebrated its 3-year anniversary, we were previously the Hope Lab in Wisconsin for 3 years before that. So we have been conducting research on issues of basic needs and security, as well as better understanding the interventions going on around the country to service students and support students in their basic needs. We're an interdisciplinary team. We come from a variety of different backgrounds to inform this work. We are part of the Lewis Katz School of Medicine at Temple University, based in Philadelphia. We see that our work is very crucial and deeply related to issues of physical and mental health. So we're happy to be in the School of Medicine there. In terms of our work, we do work that supports students in colleges. As I mentioned, we hope to expand it to also high schools. Our work is a balance of a variety of different activities. What you're here today is to see some of our applied research. It is applied in the sense that we are conducting research to inform practice and policy. And that means some of the basic research, like our surveys, as well as evaluations of a variety of interventions, innovative interventions around the country. We also provide technical assistance and professional development to practitioners around the country working in higher ed, trying to serve students and support students in their basic needs. We also provide a lot of advising in terms of speaking to policy and policymakers at the state level, local level, and federal level. And we're very strategic in terms of our communications and outreach. We have a very broad audience. We're not just speaking to researchers, so we're very happy that we're here today as part of that. Now I'm going to turn over the presentation to my colleague, Callie, who will now get into the study results.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I am so delighted to be here. This work is very close to my heart as someone who used to support high school students in the transition to college and help realize their higher education aspirations. So a little bit of background and laying the foundation for why this work happened. We know that there's declining community college enrollment rates, not just in Florida, but across the nation. This has been going on for a number of years. This is not new, but what we see is that it disproportionately impacts Black college enrollees, especially in Florida, where we see that college completion rates are lagging 10 to 15 percentage points behind their Latinx and white peers. So we already know this is going on. We also know that this has only been made worse by the pandemic. So in 1 year alone, we saw a drop in community college enrollment of 11% for Black students in 2020, higher than any other racial or ethnic group. Next slide. Okay, we also know that Black college students are facing disproportionately challenges that their Latinx and white and Asian peers aren't experiencing. So what you're looking at right here is from a previous survey done by the Hope Center. And we do an annual survey that looks at basic needs and security. And what that is it's really genuinely the things that are fundamental to learning. So that would be like housing insecurity, food insecurity, homelessness. We consider those basic needs that are the foundation for every student to have access to if they are going to learn. So we evaluate basic needs and security of college students across the nation. What you're looking at on this slide is just a slice of that as it applies to Black Florida college students. And so what we see is that for those students, our Black college students are experiencing these basic needs and security at rates higher than other racial and ethnic groups. And this only grows as students get older. So the slice you're looking at right here, this is for relatively young college students between 18 and 20. And these basic needs and securities only grow as students get older. Next. Okay, so this takes us to the goals of this project. We really want to understand, not just after students get to college, right? Because that's a little bit too late if you want to realize aspirations. We want to talk to students right at that precipice, students who want to go to college. They've already made those first steps, but they haven't yet transitioned fully. So we want to ask them about their expectations, the challenges they're facing, and the obligations they have in their lives as they progress on the road to college enrollment. And we want to do this to identify points of intervention so that we can better support these students as they transition to college. Next. All right, so that takes us to this survey. So what did we do? Well, we partnered with a couple large Florida community colleges, in particular, Miami-Dade College and Hillsborough Community College. And what we did is we asked them to administer a survey to all of their students who had applied for fall admissions who were at least 18 years old. So these were first-time applicants. These are students who are entering these colleges for the first time and plan to show up this fall, right now. And then that survey was administered to slightly less than 14,000 students. That's who the survey went out to. We had a little bit less than 1,200 start the survey. And then we ended up with a final pool of students who we're going to talk about today. So that final pool of students had to complete the first page of the survey where we asked them their age, their demographics, their race, etc. Of those, we had 257 students who identified as Black, 711 students identified as Latinx, and 515 white students. All right, so let's talk about who participated in this survey. In particular, the characteristics of the Black college applicants that participated. Now, I want to preface this by saying, in no way is this an exhaustive list of the ethnic identities of Black college applicants, in no way, but it does help us get a little bit at the heterogeneity that may exist for students who identify themselves as Black. So we asked students to identify as many racial and ethnic categories as they felt applied to them. And what we saw is that 83% of our applicants who identified as Black identified themselves as African American, 31% as Black Hispanic, 17% as Caribbean, and 10% as African. Now, they could identify as multiple categories here. So these aren't mutually exclusive, but it does bring a little bit of wealth to the identities and the heterogeneity of Black college applicants. So a little bit more about those applicants. They were by and large on the younger side of college enrollees. So 82% of them were below the age of 20. 68% of them were first generation college students, and 80% of them were recent high school graduates, which means they had just completed high school or will complete high school within the last year when we surveyed them. Now, I'm going to highlight some points of difference as we go through these slides. And these points of difference might be within race or across race and ethnicity. So in particular, with regards to recent high school graduates, we do see some differences across race and ethnicity. So our Latinx students were slightly more of them were recent high school graduates. And amongst our white students, we see substantially less of them were recent high school graduates. Now, within race. So amongst students who are identified as Black, what we do is we also see differences here. So our Black Hispanics applicants were more likely to be recent high school graduates, right? And our African American graduates, we had about 80%, Caribbean 76%, and our African college applicants, about 50% were recent high school graduates. Okay, so before we get to where they are now, we wanted to ask students a little bit about what happened before you got to the summer of college. So we asked them to reflect back to when they were in high school. And we asked them, did you meet ever, even one time, with someone in your high school, whether that be a teacher, a counselor, a coach, to talk about college at all, anything about college? And what we see is that 74% of our Black applicants had talked to somebody at least once, right? But I do want to point out that that means that 25% of students, Black college applicants who had applied and made that step to get to college had not spoken to anyone at their high school about this. So 1 in 4. Of those students who did talk to someone, about 3/4 talked to someone about filing a FAFSA, and less than half talked about meeting their basic needs. Now, there's a little bit of a disconnect here because we know that Black college students have much higher rates of basic needs insecurity, and we're not seeing a very high percentage of them getting supports in that realm in high school. Okay, amongst Black college applicants, what does this look like, right? So we do see a little bit of difference depending upon ethnicity amongst Black college applicants, but we see the same kinds of trends that students are largely talking about college options more than they're talking about things like meeting their basic needs. This isn't surprising. Talking about college options is something that I think people feel more comfortable with and have a greater knowledge base. But I do want to remind people that, again, these are individuals that are on the path to college, and we only still see, 75% of them, 80% of them even talking about FAFSA once. So that's a good portion of them that aren't getting that support. Next. Okay, so what do the financial challenges look like for these groups of students, especially our Black college applicants? A little less than 60% receive some type of means tested benefit, whether that be a SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, Medicaid, free reduced price lunch while they were in high school. So a good portion of these students' families are coming from lower incomes. 30% meet criteria to file independently. 16% have child care responsibilities, and another 7% have family care responsibilities. Now, child care responsibilities could be their own children, or it could be siblings. If it's any child that they are responsible for taking care of, that falls into child care responsibilities. We do see great differences as far as these proxies for family income. We see great differences across race. So only 15% of our white survey respondents, their families received any type of means tested benefit. And keep that in mind as we go further through this, this presentation, because that kind of highlights where we're going to see some differences later on potentially. All right, fall enrollment plans. By and large, everybody, regardless of race and ethnicity, wanted to show up full time. So 2/3 overall, and amongst our Black applicants, just right on par, 2/3 of them planned on enrolling full time. We had about another quarter who expected to be part-time, and then a portion of them that still weren't sure. Now, we gave this survey in the summer, so this is a summer survey. And so to see that there's still ambiguity at this point about enrollment and what that would look like can indicate that there's still some questions that haven't been answered for students about what their college enrollment will look like in the fall. Now, among Black applicants, this does vary a little bit. So we see that the students who identified as Caribbean, more of them expected to be full-time than we see for our Black Hispanic students. Next. Okay, so now that we have a little bit of lay of the land of what types of supports they got before college and their plans for enrolling for college, we wanted to ask them about how they felt about starting college in the fall. the majority of them were excited, which is fantastic. And this is for students across the board, regardless of race and ethnicity. What we see here is particular to our Black college applicants, but across the board, everyone pretty much felt excited to start college. But we did see that our Black college applicants also indicated that they felt stressed, nervous. There's a mix of emotions going on here. So we do see that there's a lot of emotions that students are having about college. And this does differ a little bit across race and ethnicity, but in general, people tend to feel the same types of mix of emotions. Next. All right, so why this mix of emotions? It could be a lot of different things. So we wanted to unpack why students were feeling certain ways about college and to get a little bit better idea, especially around the challenges that they expect to face in college. All right, so once we saw how students are feeling about college, we wanted to know a little bit about how they're feeling about affording college. That's a much more specific question. And in fact, not just affording college in general, but affording the college that they applied to. So these are students, if they applied to Miami-Dade or they applied to Hillsborough, this is particular to attending that college. And this is important because we're talking about students' feelings about a very actionable step. They've already applied to these schools. 2/3 of them are worried or stressed about having to take out student loans to pay for college. And this is in the term before college starts. This is the summer, right? And a similar amount of them are worried or stressed about paying for college in general. And this one is almost 30% were doubtful that they could afford to attend Miami-Dade or doubtful that they could afford to attend Hillsborough. So these are very specific questions mere weeks before the start of the fall term. And we have a little less than 30% who are doubtful they can afford to attend the college that they intend to start in the fall. Now, we do see that this is different across race and ethnicity. A little similar for our Latinx students, but we do see a difference here. Our white students, a lot more of them are confident that they can afford the college that they intend to go to. And this is what I meant when I said, think back to that question about finances and looking at families who are most likely from lower income families. We had more white students who had financial resources comparatively to their Black and Latinx peers. And we see that as potentially a reason for why they might be more confident that they can afford college. Okay, so then we wanted to unpack, all right, how do you plan to pay for college? You have these feelings of not being confident about being able to afford college. So what exactly is your plan for paying for it? What we see is that by and large, students across race and ethnicity expected to have in-state tuition. Now, the difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition is very substantial. So either expecting to pay an out-of-state tuition or not being sure of which you are going to pay can be a big burden for students as they enter into the fall term, or they look to enter into the fall term. That would be thousands of dollars in additional bills. Now, I want to be clear here, because this is the summer before, it actually doesn't matter if the student would actually receive an in-state bill. It matters what the student expects to receive, because that's what they're going to be basing their decisions on when it comes time to enroll. So we see that 13% of students, of our Black applicants, were not sure whether they would be receiving a bill that reflected in-state tuition or out-of-state tuition. And then as far as paying for that bill, the majority of students expected to pay for this with a future job and through family and friends. Both of those sources are outside of the student's direct control, especially in our current job market. So we're looking at sources of finances that are an external locus of control. So they don't really put the power within the student, right? So they're relying on family or friends or relying on a future job. This might create some of those feelings of unsureness that we're seeing later on. Less than half expected to receive aid through a Pell Grant, which for the percentage of students who receive a means-tested benefit, we would assume that this would be a lot higher. Now, as far as our Latinx and white peers, even less of them expected to receive aid through a Pell Grant. These are much lower rates for everyone across the board than we would expect. Now, as far as the amongst Black applicants, there is one area that pops out to be a little different or surprising. So our Black Hispanic applicants in particular were more likely to be unsure of whether they were going to be paying in-state or out-of-state tuition. Next. Okay. So we know that students are unsure of how they're going to pay for college. We know that they were not necessarily expecting FAFSA funds, Pell Grant funds, but at the same time, the vast majority of them, when asked if they expected to receive state or federal financial aid, they said yes. In fact, almost all of them said yes. So then we asked those students, okay, well, if you're expecting state or federal aid, have you filed the FAFSA? And what we see is that of those students who expected state or federal aid, a lot of them had filed FAFSA, about 83%, but nearly 20% hadn't or weren't sure that they had. And if you've ever filed the FAFSA, you're pretty sure you've done it. It's not a fun form. So this indicates that there's a good portion of students out there who are expecting to receive some type of help from the state or the federal government, and they are most likely not going to receive that for this fall term that's happening mere weeks away. That's concerning. Next. So we see already a little bit about what's going on with students' feelings about paying for college. We see a little bit already about what's going on in students' expectations to pay for college. Now we're going to shift to another question. What are students' expectations for supporting their families while in college? This is often overlooked in so many ways when we look at funding higher education. We overlook the fact that a lot of students are also supporting their family units. So what we see is, by and large, 70% of Black college applicants expected to contribute to their family in some way, whether that be more than half or some, but they expected to have that financial obligation. There should be a pop-up on this one. Okay, great. When we look at those who don't expect to contribute, it's only 17%. Only 17% of students said, I don't expect to contribute to my family. There is a little bit of difference across race and ethnicity. So our Latinx students, by and large, only 10% of them said that they did not expect to contribute. And slightly more of our white students said they did not expect to contribute. All right, so we know so far, students are worried about paying for college. They're unsure about how they're going to pay for college. They're expecting to have family financial obligations. And now we want to look at their own current situation, their family's current situation related to food, housing, and homelessness. So this is going back to those basic needs that we talked about at the beginning of the PowerPoint. So we know when students are in college, of students who are in college, their basic needs insecurity rates are very high. When we look at these students who are, by and large, just leaving high school, so this is that time period where they've just left K through 12 and they haven't yet entered into higher education, we want to ask them, okay, how are you and your family experiencing food, housing, and homelessness? And what we see is that about a quarter of them are struggling with food insecurity, housing insecurity, or homelessness overall. So 1 in 4. By and large, this is of the Black college applicants. And by and large, that's from food insecurity. About a little less than 20% were dealing with housing insecurity, and 11% were homeless. There are some differences here. Our Black college applicants were much more likely to deal with food insecurity than their Latinx or white peers. Amongst Black college applicants, we see very large differences related to housing insecurity. So for applicants that identified as African American, the rates of housing insecurity were 15%. For those who identified as either African, Black, Hispanic, or Caribbean, those rates are double or even more for housing insecurity. So what this gets at is that as students are leaving the potential safety net of K through 12, where they have access to free and reduced lunch, where they are living under, where their families may be insulating them to an extent from basic needs and securities, and the system itself may be insulating them from basic needs and securities. As they transition to college, we can only expect that these rates are going to increase and that it's going to disproportionately impact our Black college applicants and Black college students. And that even within Black college students, that there's going to be inequities in who is impacted in basic needs and security. Next. Okay, so I want to talk, I just gave you a lot to process. I want to talk a little bit about where we see this work going or what we would recommend happening from this work. The bottom line, what we want to express is that most Black college applicants are facing financial challenges as they transition to college. That is clear. Many are unsure about how they're going to pay for college, and a good portion expect state or federal aid, but they haven't yet filed a FAFSA. And then lastly, about 1 in 4 are dealing with basic needs insecurity already before they've entered college. Recommendations. We're dealing with a group of students that need to be helped before they enter college and after they enter college. And those are slightly different recommendations. So I'm going to break them into 2 slides. Before college, we absolutely need to support students in FAFSA completion. For students to have applied for college and to be expecting state or federal aid and to have 20% of them not have started a FAFSA weeks before the fall term, that's a gap that we need to close. We can do this through post-secondary coaches. Post-secondary coaches will play pivotal roles in increasing FAFSA completion and assisting students in the college selection and access process. And then we need to consider extending emergency aid to the transition between high school and college. So that's a pivotal point where students are hitting financial barriers that without that extension of emergency aid, they may not be able to navigate. Once they're in college, for those that do transition, we need ongoing supports to students and their families related to basic needs. We need to connect to public benefits, not just campus resources, those are important, but wider public benefits. And consider using HERF funds or higher education emergency relief funds for emergency aid for these students. And then in general, greater mental health supports to support students as they're dealing with all of the range of emotions that students deal with and all of the life challenges they deal with while they're in college. Okay. I want to take a moment. I'm going to hand this back over to Kimberly.
Thanks so
and
much, Kelly.
I'm not sure how you want to handle the
Yeah, perfect. So thank you so much, Callie. That was very informative. I know I learned a lot and I even saw your slides ahead of time. I feel like I learned so much more. One thing that just before we move into our Q&A, I have to make a little plug. One moment. This wants to work. Zoom is still so fun, even this far into all our virtual stuff. So if you enjoyed this webinar today, I hope you'll join us for our next one, which is next week on the 20th. And it is called Strengthening Campus Connections, How Living Learning Communities Increase Student Success. Really excited about this one. We're going to have leadership from both FAMU and USF, as well as students who've gone through LLCs, talking about their experience and how this is a really promising practice to support students in their college journey. So now we will move into Q&A from the audience. We have had a few come in. So one that came up for Vanessa and Callie from, let me see, I believe it was Alex, who asked, were you able to look at if students were first generation or not?
Yeah, so we absolutely could. So we asked specifically whether the student or the applicant would be the first in their family to enroll in college. And then we also asked whether they would be the first in their family to complete college, because those are very important distinctions. And by and large, across race and ethnicity, more than half were. Amongst our Black applicants, it's much higher. So we see more than, closer to 80% of the Black applicants were first generation college students, slightly less for our white applicants.
Great. So another question that came in. So Hope Center has done a ton of these surveys. I know you've done some deeper work in other states. How do we compare? Are we similar? Are we different here in Florida? Any takeaways that you guys were able to glean?
Yeah, well, something that's unique about this survey is this is our first of college applicants. Typically, in our national surveys, we survey current college students. And something that Callie pointed out that we noticed is that among the applicants at Miami-Dade and Hillsborough, it does look a bit different in that they're a bit younger than our traditional sample of students that we survey. But in terms of looking at racial disparities in experiences of basic needs and security, the patterns are very similar to what we see nationally, in that we do see a gap in the students experiencing basic needs and security. More Black students around the nation, and these are nationwide surveys, experience basic needs and security than their white counterparts.
And Vanessa, you just shared something in the chat. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. So this is a link to our most recent survey, recent report on a fall survey that was given fall 2020. And there you can look at results, you can look at information about college students experiences around basic needs and security, as well as a variety of challenges that college students were facing during the pandemic. But as I mentioned earlier, like this is a very different sample than we typically, being that we don't usually survey college applicants. And I believe, given the pandemic and what we saw in terms of drops of enrollment, we were particularly interested in this group of students.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know we at FCAN here reference your reporting a lot and love the data. And I think a few Florida schools participated, right? So we have Florida.
Absolutely.
Great. So one question that came in, but I don't think we asked this, so you can correct me. Did you guys ask about immigration status?
So we did not. We did not. And that is always, right? That is always a tricky thing to kind of untease. And sometimes you can get proxies for that, or you can kind of approximate that. But we did not directly ask about that in the survey.
Great. And since you mentioned proxies, this question's coming from me, an audience member. So I'm familiar with your methodology a little bit and how you ask about food insecurity, housing insecurity, and homeless, because we know most students aren't going to say, yes, I'm homeless. So I know you use several questions to kind of get at those concepts. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So in terms of food insecurity, we do base our questions that we ask of students based on the USDA agricultural surveys that are conducted that measure food security across the nation, among households across the nation. And so we ask about a variety of questions. In this particular survey, I think it was about 10 different items about whether or not students experience challenges in accessing nutritional, like nutritious food, whether they worried about not having enough money to pay for their next meal. So it's a variety of different questions. I'm also going to share in that link, there is a link to a web appendices that has all the questions. They're very similar to what we ask on our national survey. So, and I'm also going to drop a survey guide that we give out to practitioners who are interested in conducting their own survey on food insecurity, housing insecurity, and homelessness. In terms of housing security, housing insecurity, it's a bank of about 9 questions that ask students about whether or not they had trouble paying their rent on time, or rent or mortgage on time. Whether or not they had issues paying with their utilities, because that's often a risk indicator of whether or not students are having issues around housing, whether or not they moved more than 3 times. In terms of homelessness, you're absolutely right. We do not ask students, did you experience homelessness? Because many students don't see their experiences as reflective of homelessness as it's typically accounted for in the US. So what we do is we use a bank of items that are much more aligned with the McKinney-Vento Act, and that asks about a variety of experiences reflect students experiencing homelessness, like did you couch surf? Like, did you stay with friends or family on a temporary basis? And that is often, in terms of college students, that's one of the primary ways that students experience homelessness. I think nationally, people don't think of couch surfing as an experience of homelessness, but hearing from students, it absolutely is, because it affects, if you're having to think about where you're going to stay and the security of staying on a friend's couch, then you potentially have that additional stressor of thinking about, how are you going to keep a roof over your head? And that's a real problem that students are experiencing. So all of that information is available in the guide and our web appendices.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of that detail, Vanessa, because I think a lot of people don't realize how nuanced these experiences are. And, food insecurity is more than just, do you have food? Like, are you eating ramen? Like, we always talk about college students eating ramen, but do you have access to nutritional food that will, sustain you and help you stay in school and all those good things for a healthy life? So I'm glad you were able to give more of that detail there.
Kimberly, I wanted to just jump in too, and real quick too. As I've been looking at all these questions as well too, people have asked about different things that we may do or think about in the future, and I just want to say that keep sending those questions, even if we don't get to address every single one today, because we kind of think about this as stage one. We've started this work to understand those factors. We did it in Miami-Dade College in Hillsborough because we wanted two different areas, but who knows where there could be opportunities for expansion. So I just want to thank everyone for the really great questions. Know that, this is a phase one of trying to do this understanding in Florida. And, some of those questions that you put in there are really good thought-provoking ideas as we move forward in the future.
Yeah, that's good. And I was actually going to go to that question next. So someone asked, will there be opportunities for other colleges to participate? So Paul talked to that. But Vanessa and Callie, do you also want to talk a little bit about the Real College survey and how folks might be able to get involved there if they're interested?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we have been doing our Real College survey for about 6 years now. We are taking a bit of break this fall and trying something different. We're offering technical assistance with institutions who are interested in conducting their own survey. So we're doing that this year, but we are in the process of planning for the fall 22 survey. We know that colleges have received additional funds, so they could start planning for that situation in which they may want to participate in our survey. That information, I believe, is not available on our website yet, but if you're interested in that, please feel free to go to our website and to check in. We'll try to have, we'll probably have also announcements on social media to recruit and get more colleges involved.
Yeah, great. So Elizabeth just made a comment, and I want to see if it's not a question, but maybe you guys can speak to it. So she said, for years, we've seen the disparities that minority students have faced, and perhaps it's time to work in collaboration with local, state, and federal government. I could not agree more. Callie and Vanessa, I know you do a lot of that work. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, and so something that our research center does that a lot of other research centers, some I've worked at some others out there that don't do as much as we do, is the policy work. Our work is deeply integrated across our research team. We also have a team that works closely with practitioners in developing and conducting technical assistance and professional development. So these conversations around the research, the work on the ground, and policymakers are very intertwined and very strategic, so that in a sense, we're lifting all boats. We're trying to impact the most students possible. We're interested in systems change. So we try to link all of those conversations. And I think the ultimate goal that we're trying to reach is, instead of where I would say maybe even a decade ago or so, a lot of the conversation around getting students ready for college was around college readiness, and getting students academically ready. Where we're seeing a shift now, we're definitely seeing a shift in how we're doing research and how we're talking to policymakers, is making sure that colleges are student ready. They're ready for the students that they receive, and making sure that the practices and policies in place serve the students who want to attend college and want to get a college degree.
Yeah, that's great. Paul, I have a question for you, not to put you on the spot. Obviously, Helios Education Foundation funded this research. You guys are a really strong partner to FCAN and several other organizations in our state and really moving the needle. What were your key takeaways, or how are you thinking you're going to use this as a foundation?
Yeah, I think one thing I will say is, the key takeaways obviously were discussed today, but the way we'll use it as a foundation is we're having internal discussions. Helios really around our areas has a community investment team. We have a policy team. We have a research team, and really understanding and starting to think about, what are the strategies that we can employ with this too. One of the things we don't want to do is just do piecemeal things, but we're trying to use the findings from this work and other work that we've been working on across the state, also connecting it with other work that we've been looking at with, who has access to rigorous courses like dual enrollment and AP and other things around, curriculum opportunities. And we're really trying to take all of these findings to build a stronger strategy. But that's why one of the reasons we wanted to share this information and not just hold it at Helios, or that we wanted the information out there so that partners, Kimberly, like FCAN, and so many of our other strategic partners across the state can start thinking about this in their own planning too. So short answer is we're thinking about that strategy now. We're always looking at it, how it impacts our grant making and our other future research, but really trying to share results to give people an opportunity to see how it impacts their work in Florida.
Yeah, great. I know we certainly appreciate it here at FCAN, having more data to help set our strategy as well. So I think we've gotten to all of our questions, but I'm going to ask one last question to each of you. And this is my typical webinar question. So if folks leave this webinar today and they can do one thing to help support Black students in Florida in accessing and succeeding in college, what would that one thing be in your opinion? Callie, do you want to start?
Yeah, this isn't a K through 12 problem, and this isn't a higher ed problem. This is an everyone problem. So the disconnect, especially from aspirations to enrollment, happens on a continuum. And we've got to find a way to fill that gap between high school and college. And that means working together, just as you said, across interest groups, across stakeholders, to really support students, especially Black students who are disproportionately not making that leap from high school aspiration to college enrollment. For me, that is a key takeaway. And it's also something that I saw as a practitioner. So when I was a high school college counselor, we had a very unique system that provided supports not just for high schoolers, but we track them all the way through college. And you learn something very different when you do that. And that is not a system that is largely at play at most high schools. And there aren't resources typically at colleges currently to reach out to and provide supports to high schoolers before they enroll. And we really have to work together to bridge that gap. And yes, that is K through 12. Yes, that is higher education, but it's also, at the state and the federal level to find funding to support those services, because they aren't going to come from thin air, right? Everyone is strapped, right? So the K through 12 and the higher ed. And so it really does need to bring together all practitioners and the policy area together to bring this kind of change.
Yeah, great. Nessa or Paul, either of you want to go next? Your one thing that folks could do today?
I think Callie said it beautifully, and what we typically say is, right, this requires multiple stakeholders and getting multiple stakeholders in the same room, K-12, higher ed, and the nonprofit world too.
Yeah, I think about where we are in the time of the year. So short term, the one thing to do today is make sure people, all students especially, are really starting to focus on FAFSA. How do you understand your college going opportunities? It is the FAFSA time. We know that, there's obviously a strong correlation between FAFSA completion and college going. So let's start with that as step one. We can do other priorities along the way, but get FAFSA so that students can actually see that they can afford to go to college.
Yeah, thanks for that. Hopefully if folks are on this webinar and they know FCAN, they know FAFSA opened 7 days ago. We are in FAFSA season. So let's support our students in completing their FAFSA and get the money they need to attend school. So with that, we've seen no more questions come in. I just really want to thank Callie, Vanessa, and Paul for being here today, sharing this amazing work. And for everyone who's attended today, thank you for spending your afternoon with us here at FCAN. So I hope everyone has a good afternoon and we'll see you next time. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Great job.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.